You're listening to the Art of Quantum Healing podcast with your host, Leisa Nadler. Each week we'll be welcoming divine souls who have overcome trauma, mental health addiction, and found next level abundance through mind, body, and soul connection. We will be going deep on one subject to teach and guide you. My mission is to help you high vibe, thrive with inner peace, passion, and purpose, all in the name of evolution.
So welcome to another divine episode of the Art of Quantum Healing. I'm super excited. We've got the beautiful Doug. Can I say beautiful to a man? Of course I can. Look at him. Beautiful Doug, who's all the way from LA. Don't you hate it when you have somebody on that's prettier than you? I'll tell you a little bit about Doug. Doug Cartwright is a speaker, author, and the CEO and founder of The Daily Shifts, an online company dedicated to inspiring lasting transformation of the mind, body, and soul. The Daily Shift was born from Doug's personal journey of introspection and healing. Now an app, ooh, yummy, a masterclass and blog. The Daily Shift has appeared on ABC News, Spectrum TV, and The Psychology Today, among others. So welcome all the way from LA.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait for this conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. There was so much
know.
when I was looking at your, what you've been through and how your journey's unfolding and the different things that you've done. It's really, as you said, but when we were talking, you've gone from here to here to here to here. It's like, it's very wide and feeling into the one thing that we can really, talk and help the listeners with was like, well, there's just so much.
I know, it's been all over the place.
Yeah, but perfect, right?
Right on time, I always say. The universe is always on time.
Even though sometimes you're like, really? Really?
Yeah.
Are we going this way again? So I'd love you to share a little bit about you and how you got to be where you are now.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey the last couple of years. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the States. And the first question people ask me when they hear that I grew up in Salt Lake City is, well, are you Mormon? And yes, I grew up in the Mormon faith. The headquarters are in Salt Lake City, and I was raised in a bubble. And the interesting thing about being raised in a bubble is that you don't realize you're being raised in a bubble. You just figured out that's how life is. And I grew up in a upper middle class, kind of wealthier neighborhood where everyone was white. Everyone kind of leaned the same way politically. Everyone went to the same church, and it was kind of like everyone was the same and looked the same. And so you kind of just get these conceptions about how life is. And I'm very blessed. I loved my childhood. But the thing about being raised in a strict, especially Christian religion, is that your life is kind of laid out for you. You're told, get good grades in school and then go to college and get a good degree and then go get a job and make this much money. And if you're a Mormon, it's, when you're 19, you're going to go on your service mission, that you become an elder. I don't know if you've seen like the Book of Mormon musical or whatnot, but it's like you become a missionary and you get called by God to go knock on doors and convert people to Mormonism. That happens when you're 19. And so your whole life is kind of laid out for you. And so you don't really have much choice. And so I kind of did everything that I was supposed to do in my childhood. I was star captain of the gridiron football team and student body vice president and like strong community leader. And as you grow up, you kind of have this looming, this big moment coming of age situation when you go on your Mormon mission. And as we were talking about before we started, but I actually got my Mormon mission call to New Zealand. And so I spent my time in New Zealand trying to convert the Kiwis to Mormonism. And the first major roadblock in our life, I believe we all have roadblocks where we expect life to go a certain way, and then there's boom, roadblock, and life doesn't unfold the way we think it's supposed to. And we all have those experiences in our life. They kind of leave you lost and confused and questioning, your life path. And that first one happened to me when I was 19, and I got sent home from my Mormon mission early.
Oh, wow.
I got kicked off the island.
Oh shit, you actually got kicked off. It isn't
I got kicked off. I remember I got a plane ticket. You're going home earlier. You've been kicked off. And it was the first time in my life where I had done something wrong. Like I had been like in the community, like people knew I was getting sent home, and there was shame and there was guilt and embarrassment. And like, it was the first time like, whoa, life isn't unfolding the way I thought it was supposed to. And that was kind of the first moment where I hit that roadblock. And what happened was, before you go on your mission, you know, I'm a 19-year-old boy. The standard of worthiness before you go is really high. So, you know, no alcohol, no girls, no pornography, no masturbation. And I had a girlfriend before I left.
You're 19.
And
Ooh.
I was 19, and I was like, no touching, you know, for 9 months, I can't touch her. And I had said, you know, it was the night before I left on my mission. Like, I'm flying on a plane to go to New Zealand for 2 years, and I won't be able to see my family or whatnot. And I went to go say goodbye to my girlfriend. And I said goodbye to everyone. I had the parties, bags were packed, and we broke some of the rules. And at that point, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't confess now. That'd be such an embarrassment to my family and to me, and the tickets already been purchased. So I left and went, you know, quote unquote, unworthy on my Mormon mission. And the shame and the guilt of, you know, it building up over time that I shouldn't be here and I'm lying. And eventually it caught up to me, and I confessed to the mission leader, and they sent me home, kicked me off my Mormon mission.
Holy moly. Isn't it amazing how one moment can change the whole direction of your life?
Yeah. And so that was kind of the first moment of like coming back into my community with like kind of a black cloud over my shoulder, over my head. Like, oh, I've screwed up, and not everyone knows that I've screwed up because I'm not supposed to be here right now. I'm supposed to be on my Mormon mission. And so I had to deal with the shame and guilt and embarrassment. Yeah. Parents and family and neighbors and community and friends, parents, because, you know, and just dealing with the embarrassment was kind of the first time I kind of questioned not just my existence and, you know, my standing with God at the time, but like, you know, my relationship, you know, with spirituality, and am I doing the right thing? And you know, is this religion really right for me? And I look back at that moment. I didn't realize it at the time, when I was only 19 years old when this happened, but that really was setting the foundation for me to eventually have a spiritual awakening. You know, this moment needed to happen. This big roadblock and shame and guilt needed to happen for me to be able to question my relationship with God and question, you know, am I in the right place? Because there's a big difference. You know, when you're 19, you don't know the difference between religion and spirituality.
True.
But anyone that's gone through a spiritual awakening realizes there's a major difference between religion and spirituality. And this was kind of that first moment when I was 19 where I'm like, okay, the path is taking me a different direction.
And usually you'd actually be beating yourself up and thinking, instead of looking at it from that perspective, most people would be like beating themselves up. I can't believe I did that, putting themselves in the hole, the shame, the pain. But you're like looking up and going, wow, hang on, maybe there's something different here. Maybe there's somewhere I'm going to go. So you're asking the right questions, which is great.
Yeah, it caused me to pause and just evaluate my relationship to, you know, my definition of God at the time, right? Anyone raised in a Christian religion, God is a man with a beard in a robe on a throne in the sky, right? And obviously my definition of God has evolved drastically over the last couple of years, but I just wanted to see where I was sitting with God in that moment. And I felt like he was really disappointed in me and really like, and I'd let him down. And so carrying that shame and that guilt, it continued to build and build over time. And so what I did was, you know, coincidentally, when I got home from my Mormon mission, around the same time is when my dad, who was my best friend, who wasn't Mormon at the time, actually got diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer.
Ooh.
And he eventually ended up passing away 13 months later. And me and him were extremely close. He was very well known in the community and was the coach of my Little League baseball and football and basketball teams, and just was, you know, very service oriented. And because we were so close, his death was extremely tragic for me. And as men, you know, especially in America, you know, you're not taught how to process your emotions, right? And we're taught to have this persona of being the tough guy and being strong and being resilient and like, don't cry, don't exactly push it down, like you said, and to not show your emotions. And so, I have this very distinct memory of, my dad was on I think it was the night or the night before he died, and he had in-home hospice care, and he was unconscious, and he was, last few moments. And I had this memory of my mom putting her arm around me as we sat on the bottom of the staircase in our house, and she was consoling me. And I remember feeling this massive rush of sadness and grief and despair starting to come up. And I start sobbing uncontrollably in front of her for about 3 seconds. And then my mind goes, you need to be strong for mom. Be the tough guy. Don't be weak. Don't be weak. So like you said, once again, boom, I start shoving it down, start shoving the grief down, start shoving the despair down, start shoving the, embarrassment and resent down. And these emotions are starting to fester and build, right? So now I've got shame of God getting home from my mission and my dad dying. And these emotions, as we know, if you don't deal with your emotions, they don't go away.
It's deep trauma. Holy shit.
Right.
Yeah.
It's deep trauma. And so these emotions are starting to fester and build. And I needed some sort of distraction, right? I've realized as humans, when emotions start to bubble up that are uncomfortable, what do is we don't want to feel the unpleasant emotion. So we'll distract ourselves, right? Yeah. Whether it's something as intense as drugs and alcohol, or it's social media and Netflix.
Yeah, checking a coping mechanism, abso-friggin-lutely.
Exactly. And we all have these, right? We all have these coping mechanisms. Like there's this emotion that's incredibly unpleasant I don't want to feel.
Yeah.
How can I find a way to cover that up so I don't have to feel it?
We're not taught. We're taught to, just to keep on with your what. It's like when different things happen in your life and there's a lot of sexual abuse things. And I told someone, it's like, oh no, you don't say anything. You sit in the corner. We hide it down. So it's just keep layers and layers and layers, keep going down.
Yeah. So I came across a really interesting coping mechanism, which was, I found a company to hire me that did sales, 100% commission sales.
Make money.
So I sold alarm systems door to door on 100% commission and became crazy obsessed. So my coping mechanism was make money.
Not to
right. If I can build a business or build, a sector under this business and recruit and train and lead and manage, right? If I get enough stuff outside of me, maybe the inside will feel okay.
And did you ever go through that? When I'm successful, everything will be okay. When I'm successful, nothing
will
matter. Yeah.
It was totally, it's like, okay, if I can get the right, the really hot girlfriend and the really nice car and the cool penthouse suite, then everything will be okay.
Yeah.
So I found exactly, right. And what's fascinating with my situation is I found a path to do that. Right. I had a very tangible way that was accessible to actually do that. And so I just, I remember this light lit up underneath me of like becoming incredibly obsessed with sales and going to sales seminars and reading sales books and reading leadership and reading, healthy habits and mindset and goal setting, which are all really valuable tools and techniques. And I started becoming a leader. I was one of the youngest leaders in my company history. And, lucky for me, I ended up being at a company that was growing at a remarkable pace, which ended up becoming the biggest smart home provider in the world. And I got in at an early age. And so I'm riding this rocket ship, making gobs of money. I made $1 million when I was 24 and was spending it.
That's what people want. Yeah.
Right.
Happy they did it.
It was wild. It was a wild time. And I was spending it just as fast as it was coming in.
Yeah.
Because it was like, okay, if I get the nicer Mercedes, or if I, go on the cooler worldwide trip, first class, and go to Peru and go to Nepal and go to China and like do all these crazy trips, then, hopefully I can find the answers And maybe the Nepalese people, they have the answers. So let's go visit them, And
Kind of
so,
seek it, don't you? Everything externally is going to fill you internally. It's just, it's the one-on-one, no. It's not how it works, but that's what you think you have to do. So
and we've heard this
lack of as well. You're like, your lack of everything, because you're not happy for what you have. You're constantly seeking.
Well, the thing that's what I learned, which was so tricky about it, was that external fulfillment actually works for a very short time. So you get this hit, you get like this dopamine hit, right? Yeah. Where it's like, the new car, and it feels really cool. And then a month later it fades. But for 30 days it worked.
I'm not that.
And so you keep exactly.
Like, I love it. It's got all these new toys. It's like, next one now.
And then 30 days later you're over it. And so it's so tricky and sneaky because it actually gives you the high that you're seeking, but it's just not sustainable, right? And so, by the time I was 27, I fell victim to what I talk about in my book as the success void. And the success void is when, if I were to give you a resume of my life, it would look very successful on paper. Car, trips, experiences, dating pretty women, right? But there was this deep void and I didn't know how to fill it. And it was actually a really scary time in my life because I kind of had this fast track to wealth and achievement that most people don't get in their life. And I was able to, hit it in my mid-20s. And so I remember, there was a period of time in my life where I didn't have a sense of direction because there was no roadmap.
Yeah. It was just money,
and
just make money, just make more money.
Yeah. That was literally, I would ask my mentors at the time, hey, what advice do you have for me? And they're like, hey, go make more money. I mean, and I wasn't making like crazy private jet money, but I was doing very, very well. And I remember thinking like, a couple extra $100,000 a year, like it's not going to make any difference.
Something missing, right? There was just something.
There was something missing. And that's when the universe decided to step in.
As it does.
And as it does, And so, for the sake of the conversation, there's so many fun, crazy synchronicities that happened in my life. I felt like I was living in a movie, and I share them in detail in my book, Holy Shit, We're Alive, which I know we'll have the links on here. But for those that really want to go in the deep dive of like connecting all the dots and down the rabbit hole, I share those in my book. But for the sake of conversation, really weird things started happening in my life, and there was clues, right? Like I kept feeling like I was getting clues. And a first major clue was I read the book You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero.
Read that.
Yeah, we love Jen, right? Yeah. And she just talks about, in a very playful, non-threatening way, of like how to, manifest an abundance in the universe. Because I would say like the book like The Secret, and I'm like, it's garbage, And like yoga was such a turnoff for me because I'm not going to be some hippy dippy and meditation was for weak people, and therapy was for people that were broken, and I'm not the woo woo hippy dippy guy, and so none of that stuff seemed approachable for me. But like that book was a very beginning, nice entryway, and like Eckhart Tolle, New Earth was just like too deep. I just didn't get it. And so a couple of, go ahead.
At that time you didn't, because you were just starting to evolve. Yeah.
I wasn't ready for it. And so, the first thing happened, which was that book, You're a Badass. And then my twin sister was very deeply spiritual, and she was kind of giving me clues. And then I eventually decided to take the plunge into yoga, and which was really powerful for me, of moving my body at such a slow pace and connecting to the mind, body, spirit. And things just started happening in a very interesting tone and mannerism. And I felt like I was being guided, almost a sense, energetically. I didn't know how to describe it at the time. I didn't have the right words for it at the time, but I was definitely like in this flow, and I was following my intuition, but I didn't know how to define it at the time. And the big turning point was there's an experience that happened in Costa Rica that I share in the book, but a major turning point was I came across this book called Stealing Fire, which is by Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheal, and they talk about flow state, right? So how to get into the zone, whether you're an artist or a musician or an athlete. And it's just like things are coming really easy for you. You're not thinking about time. You're just reacting. You're producing beautiful work. So I pick up this, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's
So I
hard to
pick up this,
master too. That's something that's really, really hard to master is being in the present
because
moment. We naturally
yeah,
want to think about all the other things going around us. Yeah, we want to control.
right. And there's like this meter of like, is it too hard for flow and is it too easy for flow? So you always are like kind of moving this needle. And so I picked up this book with the intention of like becoming a better leader and salesman. But what I wasn't prepared for was a section of the book where they talk about psychedelics. And growing up in white conservative Utah Mormonism, you're kind of just taught that every substance is basically methamphetamine. And if you do it one time, you're going to become addicted and die. Right. So it's just like there's this big blanket on all of it. You don't even touch it. And so I'm reading this book and they talk about, MDMA in regards to therapeutic and PTSD recovery. They're talking about psilocybin mushrooms and the research in anxiety and depression. They're talking about LSD and the creative flow, and then DMT, which is the active ingredient in ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And I'm reading this and these powerful stories. And I'm reading this and my jaw is on the floor. I'm like, what? I'm like, what in the hell is going on? This is insane. And I remember this,
right? It's
whole new world. Whole new world. And I remember feeling so infatuated with the information. And I was reading online and diving in. And I remember feeling called to it.
You feel like you were being naughty because, I mean, you were being programmed in a certain way. And it's almost like, when you did what you did when you left the day before to go to New Zealand. It's sort of like, oh, am I about to go into another no-go zone? Did you feel any sort of like, or were you like, oh my God, no, I'm just totally drawn to this?
It was both. It was, I'm feeling totally drawn to this. And also I'm scared to death.
Yeah.
I am scared to death to go here, but I feel like I need to.
Yeah.
So it was Say that again?
What made you push through?
Was after I finished the book and really, I remember internally feeling a shift. And 10 days later, I happened to be at a party up in at a cabin in Eden, Utah. I've never been offered hard drugs other than marijuana in my life. And a friend who I hadn't seen in 10 years was like, hey, good to see you, Doug. We have some MDMA here if you're interested. And I'm like, no shit. I just read about this.
Works.
Yeah. And so, long story short, I ended up having the experience and, 45 minutes in, it kicks in. And I'm having kind of a very typical MDMA experiences of feeling very connected and open-hearted, and music sounds good and lights sound good, and pretty standard MDMA experience, which feels awesome. And then there was this moment where the whoever, my friend whose cabin it was, asked us to go into his bedroom to like turn off the lights and like have glow stick things going on. I'm like, cool, sure, let's do it. We're doing drugs, whatever. We have like, I'm happy. I feel good. I love everyone. Come cuddle with me, right? And so, yeah, exactly. So we have this experience, and then like middle of the song, someone actually like accidentally came into the room and turned the light on and like killed the vibe. And so like people kind of like left the room. And then I remember I stayed and I was laying on the hardwood floor. And I remember having my hands above my head like this. And I remember thinking like, there's more here. Like there's another level in this space, this spiritual space. So I actually go to stand up to leave the bedroom to go into the main kitchen area. And I have this like, oh shit moment. Like I need help. I need help right now. And I froze, like my body froze and my spirit started to fall out of my body. And all of these really, really old memories when I was like 3-4 years old started to come back into my mind. And I'm like, oh no, my life is flashing before my eyes. I've died.
Oh no. Oh, no.
And for 8 seconds,
oh my God.
I didn't know what was going on. I'm like this toxic sales bro, like from Utah. And I'm starting to tap into these realms and I don't know what's going on. I don't have a guide. And so I'm feeling like frozen in time. That all of a sudden my body like slapped back in. And there was like this ringing, this wow, wow, wow. And I remember like, what just happened? And so I go to open up this bedroom door to go in this kitchen area. And I don't know how else to explain it. but I was in another dimension. I was in the spiritual realm, the
portal.
spiritual.
Yeah.
Totally went through a portal. I didn't know that this was even a thing. Okay. First off, I don't know this is a thing. And I'm in this portal.
Taking drugs.
Yeah. So I open up this portal. I see everyone in there, and I can see this cloud that's bright, like breathing around them. They have this light system up through their body.
My God, you're having a massive awakening.
And my first thought was like, this is what happens when you do drugs. Like, how come no one talks about this dimension?
Because we're all taught like, it's freaking bad.
Yeah, like how come no one talks about this? Well, I thought that's what happened to everybody every time they did drugs. And so I'm like, how come no one ever talks about this? Like, I'm in a whole nother dimension, talking to people, knowing everything about them, like seeing which I now are auras, breathing. And I initially have this thought, I'm like, holy shit.
You're seeing the energy.
Oh yeah. These energy
the
centers.
Body. Yeah. Oh
yeah.
My God.
I have no idea what they are at the time. And then I remember thinking like, holy shit, the hippies were right. The damn hippies were right this whole time. It's the hippies have gotten it right the whole time. And so I then go out onto the patio, and it's at this cabin that overlooks this beautiful lake. And I go out onto the deck and I look at the lake and I see the earth's soul breathing, like the earth soul. And I'm like, oh, Mother Earth. It's an actual living entity.
Oh God!
Whoa!
Light bulb moments did you have? Holy
light bulb.
Shit!
So I walk back into the kitchen, and then this beam of light socks me on the top of the head. That is so overwhelming. Yeah, and it's the love of the Creator that I had never experienced before, and it was like the most overwhelmingly joyous, blissful, euphoric. And I remember the first thought I had was that I didn't need to earn it. There wasn't like a checklist. There wasn't like, have you been a good boy? Okay, here's what it was. Just
growing up, of course.
Yeah, and it was this undeniable, unconditional love, regardless of how I was living my life, that it's accessible at any time. And so then I'm like realizing that I'm having a very different experience than everyone else there.
They're all like hugging and dancing, and you're like,
they're like dancing to the music, and I'm like literally immersed in the love of God, of the Creator for the first time. And I'm also in that moment, I'm realizing that God isn't a man. It's a universal like fabric that's ingrained throughout experience. Like it's a string of like connection through everything. Like I'm God, the plants are God. Well, I had this moment where it hit me, and my initial thought was, oh, I'm God.
Yeah.
Like it's me. It's me. And so I'm like looking down at like, oh, it's me. Like I'm the one. And then I remember looking up and I'm like, oh, it's we.
Yeah,
it's we. You, it's me.
That is a huge thing right there. People don't understand that we are all freaking connected. We're all connected. Yeah. We're all one. We're only
it's all of us.
Back. It's like
it's me, it's you, it's the wind, it's the plants, it's the animals, the water, it's everything, right? And so that, like I said, I had this moment like, okay, I'm having a different experience than everyone. So I go upstairs and I lay down because I'm like, I just need to be by myself for a moment because I'm never going to be the same ever again. And then I start hallucinating. I close my eyes and hallucinate, and I meet this really tall, like lanky spirit guide. And he comes to me.
Not at all.
This is insane. And I have this spirit guide, and he comes to me and he shows me, I didn't know who it was. It wasn't like an ancestor, but I knew that I trusted this thing and it was safe. And he showed me what happens before we're born and then what happens after we die. And before we were born, I can't use human words because it's beyond human words, but like there's this general's tent. And in the tent, everyone that I commune with in my life is in that experience. And then it's like, there's these contractual agreements that we sign with one another. Okay, you're going to teach me this at this point in my life. And then this girlfriend when I'm 23 is going to teach me this lesson. And this person is going to teach me this lesson. And we sign off on it. And then it's like, everyone puts their hands in the middle and it's like ready, break. And then we go get human bodies and live it all out.
So I'd like to know who signed me up for this last 2 crazy fucking years we've just had.
Yeah, it's insane.
Wow, I knew we did a soul
Yeah.
contact, but I didn't know it was that in depth. That's fascinating.
And then it shows me what happens when we die. And then I remember being in this dome and there's all these lights and I don't want to say there's a judgment because it's not coming from a place of judgment, but it's more of like a reference or like an accountability, like, hey, this is what happened, not good or bad or right or wrong, but like, here's your recap, your life recap.
Yeah.
And then I saw that you get the option to be human again, which I didn't know. I used to think at this point in my life, I thought the hippies thought reincarnation. It's like, oh, you're going to die and be a flower. Cute. Like, that's what I thought reincarnation was. And this is the first time in my life that I was conceptualizing being a human again. And then I'm in this massive dome and I see all these stars and I remember talking to the spirit guide. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stars here. He's like, oh, no. Those are other experiences that aren't human that you go to continue the evolution of your soul. And I'm just like my mind is shattered.
Ayahuasca trip. This is usually an ayahuasca trip. This is the great.
I know.
Not the freaking. Oh, wow. You must have been so absolutely on point to receive this information.
Yeah. And so then the trip kind of ends from that point. And
another one. Give me another one.
And I'm just like, what the fuck just happened?
Wow.
Like, what? Like, I will never be the same ever again. And that night, to really follow along the depth of the story, I talk about it in my book, but June 10th, 2017 was the night that happened. And I've never been the same since.
That's a real spiritual. A lot of people have little spiritual awakenings. Well, there's nothing little big, but like different things happen. But that was just like, let's just cop it all to you right now. You're going to get the whole lot. Did you know how many times you've already been on Earth? Because I know that there is a lot of times that like some are new souls, some are old souls. Did you feel what sort of a soul you were at that, or was it just?
I feel like I'm on one of my last turns. I feel a very old soul. And like I said, I hadn't studied any of this shit. And I remember like 2 nights after, I remember being out on my patio at my home in Utah and looking up into the stars and being like, oh, I think this might be my last life.
Last life, yeah. It's a big one.
Yeah.
So did you ring your sister and go, holy shit, the spiritual stuff, oh my God?
Yeah. So I called Yeah. So I was like, she's my twin sister, which is really cool.
Yes, yeah.
And I remember calling her like, okay, you were right this whole time. I thought you were weird my whole life, but you're not weird. I was weird, right? I get it. And then eventually, with her help, I was able to, the story goes on really fun, but eventually I was able to get into situations where I got to work with that ayahuasca medicine and really start to heal those deep traumas of my dad dying and my sexual abuse and my religious shame and guilt. And so, that night really was, the experience the pivotal point that kicked it all up to go do my deep trauma healing.
So you decided to do your healing with psychedelic drugs, because a lot of people, they like when I first started, I went into therapy and I just kept talking about the same fucking thing over and over again. And of course, you keep reliving it and reliving it and reliving it, and your body's putting in more emotions and more trauma. So what a beautiful way, I mean, to heal is with the help of medicine, with the help of modern proper. Like I remember I did a dieta and it was 14 days sitting with Narai. Have you ever done that? It was
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, it's one of the plants that you can actually do. There's only about 4 or 5 plants in the world, but it's one you can do with. Sometimes I give it to you with ayahuasca as well, and it's a real connected to the trees and the plants and that. And I remember just feeling at one stage that I was with one at plants, and I felt a plant actually taking a lot of my grief. And it's, as you say, you said it before, it's really hard to humanize and actually say it from your perspective. But so when you went into the psychedelics, like when you did your ayahuasca, did you set the intention that, okay, I need to heal this stuff now, this is the next part of my journey, part of my evolution? Or was it just that naturally once again follow the breadcrumbs like you started doing?
So I think it was a little bit of both, because that first initial night just opened up the door. Yeah. I said, hey, there's another path, right? And there's some work that needs to be done too. So it's almost like we have these really big boulders in our life of trauma, these subconscious stories we tell ourselves of why we're not lovable or what's wrong with us that are, stem from trauma. And I needed to go do the work on those. And so, you know, crazy story, like I said, I talk about in the book, but ayahuasca came and got me, landed in my lap.
Yeah.
And it was like, we have some work to do. She called me
at the right time.
She called me and then came and plucked me. She's like, your turn.
You're ignoring me.
Yep. And so, yeah, I've done 9 ayahuasca sessions now.
Holy
and
moly.
Yeah. And 10, 11, and 12 coming in May. And
can you just see the jealousy on my face right there?
Yeah. I don't love ayahuasca. It's just, I mean, I do love it. I love her, and I have a beautiful relationship with Mother Ayahuasca, but it's so heavy. It's so intense. It's so, it's difficult, you know? And so, but cleaning out those gutters was really powerful. It's changed my whole life. I would say, doing ayahuasca, you know, it's the most transformational, important decision I've made in my life.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny, like my husband did it with me, and he wasn't called, but he had the most. I was called, and he was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it." And we're driving there. He's like, "Oh, so what are we doing?" I'm like, "Serious? You haven't even." He's 100% intuitively led, and I'm like, "Wow, this is going to be interesting." He had the most beautiful experience, but you know, usually Mother Ayahuasca, she calls you, and I think she called him through me because he's quite.
But, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah, she does, and she can be like, I think the first time I did it, I really got a slap in the face, and the biggest thing I got was relinquish control, because I was
surrender,
especially relinquish control of the mind, because I was like, this is experience I'm gonna have, and you know, and of course that's only ego trying to play with us, but I got a completely different experience than what I thought I was going to have, and I know why the first time, so it was like, okay. So she'll also slap you in the face if you need it as well.
Oh, the most difficult nights of my entire life have been in the medicine space.
Yeah, but
because you try and hold on, you try and make sense of it, right? You try and you know, put your ego in charge. And if you put your ego in charge, it will check you. It'll put you on your knees. It will put you on your knees. It'll force you to surrender.
Yeah. You don't have it. You realize that. And this is when I realized that I was the most, you know, tiny speck on this earth, and even the trees and the plants are much greater and bigger and than what I could ever be, and I'm just here to do my little piece. And it was it was such a beautiful experience. And what other drugs have you done? What was I say? You know.
Yeah, I love working with every kind of medicine has its own purpose, right? So in partnership and friendships and connections, I like using MDMA to be able to work out, you know, situations and be able to get to the root and connect. LSD, which I very rarely use now, is more of a creative. Yeah, you know, it's not my favorite. It's long, it lasts 12 hours, and I've seen. Yeah, it's too much. It's like, and it's like too digital for me. I like the plants the most. Mushrooms, or if I need like a little recharge. I do enjoy microdosing. I do microdose almost daily. Yeah. Just it helps me feeling bright and engaged in my life. And then ayahuasca is if it's like, okay, I need a little reset.
And they're really starting to, I mean, microdosing is, for me, it's only just started coming into my realm. It's only just started coming into my field. So, and I was speaking to a couple of people about it, and they said that microdosing is really starting to be understood at a deeper level now, because there's more and more people experimenting with it. Because it used to be, you know, something like, you know, if you're taking microdosing, let's be honest, you're actually, you know, you love the drugs and you're just calling.
Totally.
Yeah. But there's not. Yeah. It's such a huge thing for it now, for a deeper understanding. And I believe that everything you do, if you put the right intention in it, and everything for me is intention. You know, when you set that intention for why you're doing something, that's the experience that you're going to have. You know, if you go into a party scene, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to drop a couple of pills and fucking party hard, then yeah, okay, cool. But you know, like when you go in with an intention and open mind for what you're actually wanting to receive, it completely, while still relinquishing the mind, because that's what I learned, it opens you up to such a beautiful experience.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The intention behind everything is so important. And I think that's why I had such a profound experience my first time, is because I've been reading spiritual texts. I've been I was open to the idea of having that experience.
Yeah. Whereas if you'd
And
gone to a party and had a couple of
yeah,
pills or a pill, it could
yeah,
have been, well, it probably would have been completely different.
right. Yeah. I mean, nothing blew me open.
Shit to the what? So
Yeah.
where are you on your journey now? You talk a lot about where you are now with meditation and yoga and being that
Hmm.
more flow-based reality and getting into in with the universal laws of just moving and flowing and tapping into that area now.
Yeah. I think, where I'm at now, I'm in a really good place right now where it's like, I love being human, right? I'm not here to raise the consciousness to 5D. Like, it's 2022. As Doug, I love watching sports on TV. I like drinking a beer. I like eating nachos. I like, playing golf. And I also like healing. So it's like you can do both. And so I do maybe, I've got this ayahuasca ceremony coming up, but I'll do one ceremony a year, right? I'm not doing a lot of medicine. And I have a very important, you can see my meditation chair behind me, but meditation is a very powerful part of my life.
Yeah.
Yoga is a very powerful part of my life. And it's just kind of these little daily tune-ups because we live in reality, right? We have to pay rent, right? We live in 2022. It's okay to be normal humans. And so it's balancing the two. And so that's what actually sparked me to start my company, The Daily Shifts, is when I, coming from like a very toxic sales bro mentality, then having that experience, is very extreme.
Yeah.
And noticed that I'm like, oh, a lot of my old community could use some help in this healing, but the current way it's being presented, it's unapproachable. It's hippy dippy. It's weird. It's woo woo.
Old paradigm
These,
as well. It's
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah. So I said, how can I repackage some of these modalities of healing and present them in a way that's more approachable? And so that's what's caused me to spark The Daily Shifts. And so it's an app, with basic gratitude, very simple meditations, goal setting, right? I work with people one-on-one. I do weekend retreats called reset weeks, where it's like, we'll take a bunch of guys that are, people that are addicted to their phones. We'll do a digital detox. We'll teach you how to do holotropic breath work. We'll do cold exposure. We'll do meditations. We'll do movement. We'll connect with nature, in 4 or 5 days, give you some tools and techniques you can take home to kind of ground in mindfulness.
And it's interesting because when that's I think that takes you back to the different books that you talked about. You can either go and like what you're doing with The Daily Shift sounds like it's that book. It's that little bit of normality because we are humans. We're souls in a human body here to have the existence, and the more we fucking fight, the more we're not going to allow it. So we have to learn to embody the two. It's that dance. It's a really it's amazing. But it's if we fight the human experience and that soul contract that we signed that you spoke about, then guess what's going to happen? You're going to get kicked up the ass, and you're going to be, but if you go and you do the yoga and the and it doesn't have to be yoga, but the meditation and do what really allows you to open up that soul level to progress and transition and transcend things, and it's going to be a lot different to sitting back and sitting in the without the duality. I believe you need them both. I really, really do. It's such a beautiful thing.
And the beautiful thing about it is that you go and do the work. You heal your trauma. You take care of these pieces. Whether it's through ayahuasca or EMDR or whatever. Then you go back into the real world, and you enjoy it so much more because you're not trying to get the real world to heal you or fix it for you. Yes. You can show up as a really high version. And I'm a big college football gridiron fan. And now, after all of my journeys and whatnot, I can go to these games and these sporting event experiences, and I'm fully present and I can enjoy it because I'm not so caught up in my subconscious mind and trying to get things to be a certain way. And I've surrendered. And like you said at the very beginning of the show, in the present moment, which enhances the human experience. So it's a beautiful thing. You can watch Netflix and drink wine and fully enjoy it, right?
Yeah,
because you've done the work
about it. And not feel
exactly.
like, am I doing something wrong, or whatever it might be. And it's interesting too because I think like you mentioned the word subconscious, and the subconscious actually rules 80% of our life, and we don't even freaking realize it. So when you can make these important shifts to your neurological pathways and to programming, and start to move more with just the flow-based mentality of the present moment, and just it is what it is, and let's just enjoy it, and not living in the past and the present or worrying or anything like that. It's a unique shift. I mean, I'm still working on it. I think everybody's still working on it. We still have moments of, oh good God,
Yeah, you never get there. And on that note I think it's important to say is that you never get there.
Every day
And accepting that you're never going to get there takes the pressure off.
Okay with it. And that's what
it takes the pressure off.
When you were going so fulling into for make this money, your nervous system, you're constantly in that high alert zone. Now you're like, okay, whatever's meant to be is meant to be. Let's just follow the breadcrumbs.
Yeah,
I love it.
Follow the breadcrumbs.
So yeah, Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you. So is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with? Just anything that flows, anything that you'd just like to say to them as we wrap it up?
Yeah, my favorite thing to wrap up with is one of the best phrases I ever got in life was from my spiritual coach and teacher that I talk about in my book when I was at the very beginning of this journey. And she just said, Doug, loosen the reins.
I love it.
We hold on so tightly to life, trying to get it to be a certain way and trying to maneuver and getting the horse to go a certain way.
The horses
just
hate
loosen
that.
the reins. Loosen the reins.
Trust. Yeah.
Loosen the reins and trust.
It's funny because you say that, because in the last couple of months, one of my biggest things through meditation has always been when I ask a question, Leisa, lean back. Just lean back. Allow it to happen. Lean back. I keep hearing this, lean back. And the more I'm leaning back and just observing and allowing, the more things are flowing. You think that, it's just such a switch, isn't it? I love that. Yeah. Loosen the reins. It's freaking brilliant.
Yeah, don't touch it. It's another phrase I use a lot. Don't touch it. We get so involved in our lives and trying to force them, just don't touch it. Just don't touch it. Hands up, surrender. Don't touch it. Loosen the reins.
Surrender is the hardest thing for humans to do.
Yeah.
Oh, that was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I know the audience and anyone who's listening is just I got so much out of that. They really have. And don't forget that the links are below for Doug's book and anything else that he has beautifully spoken about. And make sure you check out his app. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your energy and your presence and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leisa.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel and help us grow the community by sharing it with your friends. I am your host, Leisa Nadler, and this is The Art of Quantum Healing.